Welcome again. We will get started right away. My name is Sami Mäkeläinen. I'm a senior research affiliate with the Institute for the Future. Um, Before we kick things off, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathering here in Naarm. I come to you from the land of Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and Daz is from the Awabakil Warimi country. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging of these communities, and also extend our respect to other Indigenous Australians present. Most of you will be familiar with Zoom or similar video conferencing services that we'll be using today, but just as a reminder to make sure that you select everyone when you enter commands in the chat so that everyone here can see them. Secondly, if you can, please ask questions using the Q&A feature, not the chat, so we don't miss the questions. And we can also see the upvotes or other questions or have your question upvoted by others. You're welcome to add questions at any point during the presentation or interview, and we will leave some healthy amount of time to tackle those at the end. Here's our agenda today. Welcome us right now. I'll do a very quick intro to IFTF. Will not take more than a couple of minutes before talking to our guest, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Short and simple. For people who are new to the Institute for the Future, just a couple of words about us. We're an independent, not-for-profit public interest futures organization founded way back in 1968. We're based in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. We're the world's longest running futures organization, and our mission is to help organizations, leaders, really everyone to become more future ready. We do a lot of things. We do futures research. We do a lot of education as well as advisory work, and a lot of these kind of public engagements like we're doing today. If you're interested in getting trained using some of our foresight methodologies, we have a whole bunch of different courses that can be for individuals or teams. We have custom trainings. We have a 3 Horizons of AI course, of which I'm one of the lead instructors for. It's been a very popular one, where we explore the mid and long-term futures of generative AI. We've got a future thinking course on Coursera, and we have a new specific Coursera Essentials offering for philanthropic organizations. We also have a fast futures training. It's kind of a really super quick onboarding for some of the basics of IFTF. And we have a lot of these coming up. If you wish to learn foresight as a team at your organization, we'll happily do customized training for your specific needs. So a lot of these are coming up both in person and online. This is just to give you a sense of how many there are. Just go on our website if you're interested. You can learn more and sign up there. We also have a ton of free or low-cost foresight learning resources. We do foresight talks like this. We've got a Foresight Essentials newsletter on the website. We have practitioner meetups. We have Foresight Matters on Medium, where we post articles. And then we have our really popular Urgent Optimists platform, which I think is over 2,000 members worldwide. It's a low-cost way for individuals to just getting into futures community with us. It's a really active, fun organization run by our amazing colleague, Jane McGonigal. And then, of course, we have our flagship Vantage program, which is a great way for organizations to get involved who really want to be deeply involved in our research and community. And we're producing the map of the decade. And this year, after a long pandemic pause, we're actually hosting our 10-year forecast summit back in person. And that's going to be a very exciting thing to bring the community physically back together. So please join and have a look into Vantage for your organization. Okay, enough with the intro. Let's get on with why you are all here. Daz Chandler is a interdisciplinary storyteller extraordinaire, known for their innovative and immersive storytelling techniques. Daz has been at the forefront of using art and technology to create these unique, thought-provoking experiences. With that, I want to share a short 1-minute clip of introducing the concept of the parallel effect before we launch in. to our discussion.
There is a very clear prediction that our most successful theory of nature makes, and that is there are an enormous number of parallel realities, as real as this one, that have different consistent histories. So imagine a world where all of the laws of physics as we know them are obeyed, but different decisions were made along the way. Different decisions at the level of tiny microscopic particles, different decisions all the way up to what you chose to eat for lunch, and whether you chose to come to this session or not.
Stop that there and stop sharing. So, Daz, welcome. And first question from my side, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the foresight space?
Well, Sammy, interestingly enough, I'm not technically a futurist. The parallel effect works with an infinite number of possibilities, but all of those possibilities exist in the here and the now. I've tried calling myself a parallel presentist, but unsurprisingly, it hasn't really taken off. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. So essentially, we work with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and believe that there are an untold number of realities or worlds, if you like, existing alongside one another. So kind of like a kaleidoscope with every possibility branching out endlessly. And what we like to do is take audiences outside of this universe, away from this paradigm, through a wormhole to a range of other possibilities that exist in other parallel worlds. Because we find that within this playground of infinite possibilities, we have the space to imagine, to engage critically with a series of counter narratives and entirely different systems to the ones that we are predominantly living. And I think that at this point, it's pertinent to acknowledge that within our dominant reality, many of us are already living multiple truths, and many of us have become particularly seasoned at this type of plurality. For instance, right now, I'm here on Aboriginal land on what is sovereign Awabakal and Warimi country. And First Nations people in colonized lands and spaces are regularly expected to weave in and out of multiple realities, expected to weave in and out of multiple laws, multiple truths. Migrants from entirely different cultural contexts, they experience the socially acceptable parameters of both worlds, and at times this happens simultaneously. Queer and non-cisgendered conforming people having to navigate prevailing heteronormative landscapes, people of color in a world dominated by white imperialism and institutionalized racism. I mean, it's a long list, but I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that although it might seem far-fetched, particularly at 6 a.m. where I am, to sort of be talking about this stuff, many of us do it anyway and have become quite seasoned at it. But returning to the world of the parallel effect for a moment, This is where scientists who are attached to CERN's Large Hadron Collider have found a way to travel to very disparate, different dimensions. Some of these worlds feature many of the same players, many of the same events of this reality. However, at certain moments, they unravel differently. And these moments of divergence often stem from actual events or stories of ingenuity, of activism, innovation from our own histories. And I think that that was a massive creative consideration of our project, because we want to champion the inspirational stories and actors of our diverse pasts, which demonstrate an ability to act and in some cases have been largely forgotten. But I think particularly given how dystopian life in this reality is at present, I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that in this reality, when it comes to systemic change, humans have done extraordinary things before, and it's really critical to remind ourselves that humankind can and hopefully will do extraordinary things again.
So you told us a little bit about the people who already among us have to travel among multiple worlds. Can you tell us about some of the worlds that our many worlds travelers have visited?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. So clearly this is a collaborative project, and there are many artists, scholars, activists, and technologists involved. And each of these people identify in a multitude of ways. And that's always really important because for that reason, as many worlds travelers uncovering other realms, they've been able to share some really interesting and extraordinary reflections of these places. So some of these worlds look very much like this one in complexion, and others are entirely different. For instance, we had the amazing opportunity to work with a young writer and curator by the name of Kat Clark, who is a proud Wajabulak woman from the Wimmera. That's a region in what is now often referred to by its colonised name of Victoria, Australia. And in her timeline, the moment of divergence takes place on January 26, 1988. So that's a day of mourning for Aboriginal Australians. And on that date in 1988, many settlers celebrated the bicentenary of the arrival of the ships of the British First Fleet into Botany Bay and Sydney Cove on what was Bidjigal and Gadigal country. So in Kat's parallel world, it was during these colonialist celebrations that the then Prime Minister of Australia, Bob Hawke, is taken over by an ancestral spirit who's called back to right the wrongs. And through this process, a new inclusive constitution that recognises all Aboriginal nations and communities emerges. It's a world of Aboriginal language and law revival, a world where the harms of the past are faced front on, they are accepted, they are learned from. And it's a world where the many different First Nations of Australia then lead the way in maintaining the land, the waterways, and the communities. And this goes on to inspire a wave of global change. In another timeline that I'd like to just mention briefly, scholar and transdisciplinary archival researcher Eloise Chandler imagines a universe where a long forgotten declaration that emerged in our reality in 1989, I'm pretty sure, was actually signed. So in January 1989, the then Prime Ministers of France, Ricard, I think, what was the Prime Minister of France? Norway, Lubbers, and the Netherlands, Brundtland, penned a letter to select international heads of state from the global north and south, inviting them to a secret meeting in The Hague. What they were trying to do was establish a consensus on a brand new supranational authority called GLOBE. And with it, they wanted to bring in an entirely new international legal infrastructure. And this was all because they wanted to reduce long-established principles of state sovereignty and build momentum, which would be supported by legal force, if need be, for governments to act against climate change. So they were going to do some pretty cool things, like they were going to impose economic sanctions on states that continued to produce or trade in goods that contributed to the greenhouse effect. They were also wanting to create a scheme of fair compensation where wealthier and the greatest fossil fuel emitting nations, who were largely colonial powers of the global north, would financially support nations in the south as the world transitioned towards a sustainable future. So this was like an early call to action, which sadly did not take off in this reality, but in a parallel world, it prevailed. And as a result, radical systemic change took place.
So this kind of ties us into a tool that foresight professionals use for foresight work, look back to look forward, where we map out events over the past, several decades, sometimes even hundreds of years, in order to get a better appreciation of how change happens, what makes change possible, what effort did it require, and how long did the change happen. And it feels like there are parallels, pun unintended,
See what you did there, Sam.
with this creation of sort of parallel histories and parallel presents. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a key part of our creative process in building this work and in imagining what these parallel worlds might look like has been thinking about what sustainability actually means from the perspective of knowledge, from the perspective of ideas. So we want to identify critical and often forgotten moments in our diverse pasts. And we really want to try and empower our audiences to engage with their histories, with the forgotten moments of this reality. So, as an example, Frederick Douglass, who was an absolutely exceptional human being who did remarkable things in his lifetime here in this reality, also did several remarkable things in several parallel worlds. So I'm sure many people who are here sharing this space today would be familiar with Frederick Douglass. But perhaps because of the presiding systems of Euro-imperialism and white supremacy, there would probably also be many who've never had the opportunity to hear about this extraordinary human and engage with his work. So Frederick Douglass was a statesman. He was an orator. He was a visionary. He was a revolutionary. He was also an African-American slave who escaped slavery and became a prominent abolitionist. In other parallel realms, he succeeded in establishing a Black autonomous region on Turtle Island, which then inspired and supported other anti-colonial movements all around the world. And we're actually going to be talking about Frederick Douglass and these parallel worlds very soon, because we're taking our exhibition Relics from Other Realms to Belfast, Northern Ireland for Douglass Week next week, where we're going to be exploring a lot of these stories and artifacts from those worlds in further detail.
So that brings me to this artifact thing. So another tool that IFTF uses in foresight work are artifacts from the future, these kind of fictional artifacts that signify how a future might feel like or look like. And I understand you have a concept called relics from other realms. Can you talk a little bit about what they are and how they're used?
Can you tell I like alliteration, Sammy? It's tragic, really. Yeah, I'm such a dag. We regularly curate exhibitions where we work with artifacts, where we work with relics from other paradigms, from other worlds. And the objects themselves have been selected by previous interdimensional travelers who've experienced life in these worlds, and they've been selected to give audiences an insight into the pivotal events themselves, or perhaps the permutations of what then followed. But because this is almost like a museum that we're sharing, it was incredibly important to all of us involved with the parallel effect that this was handled with the utmost sensitivity, because we're very much aware of the resounding ties that exist between museum collections and, you know, the dominating psychology of colonialism. But fortunately for us, because we do work with quantum physics, all of the artifacts that we have on display as part of relics from other realms are on display on non-timeline disruptive loan from their universes of origin. So what this means is that the moment our audiences have experienced them and then departed, they are returned to the exact point in time and space in which they live. But yeah, these artifacts and relics, they come in all different shapes and sizes, all different modes and mediums, from paintings to crocheted banners to pages of diaries to lapel pins to sea-worn petrol caps. I mean, you name it, you can find lots and lots of fascinating bits and pieces.
Amazing. So speaking of audiences and travelers and experiences, my introduction to all of this and where I saw your work in the first place was an immersive storytelling experience of I've been to a parallel world event here in Melbourne. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what that project was?
With pleasure. That was so much fun. So yeah, this was a wonderful live panel event that we had the opportunity to present at the end of last year in Naarm, which is also known by its colonized place name of Melbourne. We had 4 many worlds travelers who had visited parallel worlds, and they got there, they're up there on stage and they knew these worlds inside and out, and they spoke about every aspect of the world that they had experienced, each of them clearly articulating what life in those worlds looked like, how it all worked, what systems were at play in those worlds. So for instance, one of those worlds was a world free of gender, free of all gender constructs. Another of these featured realms used an incredibly divisive and racist political referendum, one that we actually experienced in our reality, to, like, as a catalyst to then prioritize truth-telling as a way of confronting coloniality head on, which proactively then started a true healing of people and of country. Another was a paradigm where access and equity had been prioritized. And what was really great about that particular world was that it had resembled the complexion of this reality very, very closely up until the first Gulf War. And then it was as a result of the vast numbers of injured vets that they had then introduced some carefully considered frameworks and legislations which caught on internationally to make everybody's life far more accessible for everyone. So yeah, it was an amazing event, and it attracted a wonderful audience who, I think many of whom really needed an opportunity to utilize their imaginations and leave this reality behind at a time when we're kind of seeing some fairly depraved things transpire.
So one of the many remarkable things at the Melbourne event was this breadth of expertise and experience in the room, that you get this feeling that it really got people out of their silos. Can you talk a little bit about the interdisciplinary nature of all this and how it's not just about artists creating works for other artists or academics creating papers for other academics?
Oh, hell yes. Or heck yes, I should say. My apologies. It is very early here. Yes, I would love to do that. I think it's really critical right now for us to take the responsibility to work with others in different sectors. I think that we need to get out of our silos. You know, I'm a creative. I work in the arts sector. Obviously, within the arts sector, there are loads of little silos. But I found that, when I worked in film, you'd make a film and all your film friends or film buff friends would come along. We need to start thinking about ways to pop the bubble. We want to get out of the bubble. We want to sort of be able to communicate beyond the echo chamber, which is only enhanced by the dominant modes of social media that we're all on. So yes, we try to make the Parallel Effect project as interdisciplinary and as intersectional as possible. I think it's really, really important. Yeah, pop the bubbles. Absolutely, Mary, pop them. I think we really need to just reach out. There are like-minded people in so many different sectors that offer purely unique perspectives, and we need all the help we can get right now to boost our imaginations and utilize this extraordinary knowledge that's actually already there, but perhaps, hidden on a paper that only academics are reading, or in a small independent gallery that no one's seeing. So yeah, that's been a massive consideration at the helm of the Parallel Effect.
So speaking of silos, and one of the narrow or arguably often narrow-minded industries that is now imposing itself on pretty much everything is the world of AI. But it's also a useful tool, and I understand that you've been using some of these tools in your projects.
Yeah, I mean, AI is certainly a super hot topic right now. And I feel like it's still regularly framed as being one of two things. And I loathe binaries as a non-binary person, but a boon or a threat to humankind. Personally, I believe, as with most things, it has the potential to be both, and lots of other nuanced bits and pieces in between. It all depends on its application. But I also believe that if there is, one thing history has shown us, it's that you generally cannot put tech back in the bottle. So while I think it's necessary to interrogate and always be wary of emergent technology, I also believe that it's just as vital for artists, for activists, for innovators to dream up altruistic and really interesting applications that may benefit the broader community in surprising and unexpected ways, because the tech isn't going to go anywhere. So yeah, the show that we put together, we conceived, it was called Message from Another You. It's an exciting single person adventure like your very own private show, which is a blend of storytelling, of performance, and emergent technology. We've had an extraordinary run with this show. It's been at festivals all around Australia here on Aboriginal land, and every single season has sold out, which shows there's a massive interest in this type of application of AI. But what we do is we work with AI to bring its participants a message from one of the infinite versions of them living in a parallel world. It's really exciting. It's great fun, and we'd love the opportunity to take the show elsewhere in this reality of ours. So if you're working with a festival team, please get in touch.
Awesome. As maybe a final topic before we move into Q&A, there is this emerging shift of perspective in neuroscience that our brains are essentially prediction machines, and none of our realities that we experience are therefore in any way objective realities. So we in a very real way, we live in a simulation, and we all live in parallel realities, even though we cohabit the same world. Do you have any thoughts around that concept and how that plays with the concept of parallel realities?
I love this. Absolutely. Our interpretation and our perspectives are all shaped by our very own lived experiences, right? The lens through which we see the world. And I think that I was kind of alluding to that earlier on in my introduction that, in addition to just sort of, exactly, that the simulations, the very personal, unique simulations that exist in our mind's eye, in addition to that, we've got all of this other stuff, like that we have to kind of weave into our understanding of the way experiences are, like I mentioned, that there are people that are constantly having to weave in and out of multiple truths. And I was just sort of thinking, another one would be, people who are living with, women, even just like women of a particular age without children, who are still operating within narratives anchored in patriarchal norms. We touched on disabilities in, people living with disabilities in an ableist and really exclusionary world. So there's so many layers to that, and I hope that in thinking about parallel worlds, we can sort of become more aware of, the multiplicity, the plurality that is with us at all times.
Absolutely. How do people find you? How do they connect with your work? How do people find out more about everything that we've been talking about and all the other future upcoming projects? How do people engage further with this?
Okay, what I'd really love you to do is get a piece of paper and write a letter on it and put it in a bottle and cast it out to sea. Wouldn't that be so lovely? Oh, that would be so great. But no, in case it doesn't find me, although I'm really fortunate at present, I get to spend quite a great deal of time bobbing up and down in the ocean here on Aboriginal land. But we do need some more supporters on the Meta app called Instagram. We did have an Instagram that was kind of thriving at one point. The account was hacked. We all kind of lost heart, and we haven't really been very proactive at building it. Why don't you join us there so we don't look as sad? That'd be wonderful. Also, we're on LinkedIn. We have a website, paralleleffect.com. But really just I'm really kind of old-fashioned. I like email. I know that's very daggy, and not many people are into it these days, but please just send us an email. Our email address is I need the parallel effect. Well, of course you do. At gmail.com. I need the parallel effect at gmail.com. But yeah, feel free also, if you're on LinkedIn, that is one of the social media apps I actually kind of enjoy. I'm not as keen on Meta apps these days. Their censorship has made me feel a bit sick. So there you go. But yeah, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. We want to kind of work with as many like-minded and interesting, innovative souls as possible.
Thank you. I guess that also goes to show that there is no perfect social platform out there. They all come with a host of complexities and problems. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I would invite everybody to submit more questions there. Becky Cooperman asks, I've seen the project section on the website. Is there somewhere else we can explore all of these amazing parallel effect stories? And I think, partially you answered to that just now, but are there other resources that people can go to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the projects that we didn't get to touch on as part of our conversation was a global congregation that was first held in November 2020 called Vigil for the Smooth Handfish. The smooth handfish, for those who've never heard of the smooth handfish before, was a creature that existed in this reality and was officially declared extinct in, I think it was March 2020. So I'm sure many of you would be aware that each day here in this reality, we're losing 200 species of flora and fauna. It's pretty heavy. And 2020, as we all know, much like where we're at now, really felt like a little bit of a precipice, a turning point, a time to sort of reflect on where we were and what we could do differently. And it was an extraordinary moment, wasn't it, when we just saw how easy it was to just press pause on everything because it needed to happen. And that for me was a bit of a I mean, it opened a window in my mind, and I realized, you know what, we actually can stop when we need to. We can hit pause, and we can actually properly address the problems that need to be faced, and we can almost just start again. So yeah, it was introspection, it was reflection, and also a moment for people to, because we were all at home, to reach out outside of perhaps our, local sort of geographical communities, and engage with others. And so we held this global congregation, Vigil for the Smooth Handfish, across 3 time zones. It was attended by 3,000 people from all over this reality of ours. We had some unbelievable contributions that were designed by artists, scholars, activists, thinkers, and they were all around the theme of grief. What do we do when we're living in times of profound crisis, or crises, I should say? What do we do with that? Can we actually take grief and use it as a tool to kind of, empower us to properly critique and interrogate things that aren't going well, and then sort of create new life, new work, new systems, whilst paying tribute and honoring the things that we are losing. We also explored something which we don't get the opportunity to discuss very often. Is grief egalitarian? Is it accessible to us all? And I would say no, it is not. If you are living in a war zone where every single moment that you're awake or asleep is dotted in tragedy, you do not have time to grieve. This sort of hits me in a very personal spot at the moment, because I have a loved one who is dying, and it's been it's been very heavy, but I'm also aware that, you know, in having time and space around that to grieve and to be with them on this journey is actually a privilege that is not afforded to everyone. So yeah, that is one of the projects that you can actually leave our website. You can visit that specific site. You can explore the amazing contributions, and you can also hold a vigil wherever you are. You know, we want our work to be shared by others and enjoyed by others. But yeah, if there's anything that you're interested in specifically, like the sustainable knowledge section of our website, we actually encourage people to interact with some of the forgotten histories from, you know, this reality that could have led to very different todays. So yeah, please reach out and please take your time exploring what we have available on our website.
Excellent. There's a question which has been uploaded a few times. What makes a good relic / artifact?
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, many worlds travelers basically they select these images or these sort of relics, and they're often sort of tangential to the pivotal moment that they represent. A great example, well, one of my personal favorites, is this sea-worn petrol cap. Now, this comes from a world that for a long time resembled the complexion of this one quite closely. But in the 1970s, there was an extraordinary amount of innovation happening within the solar space. Here on Aboriginal land, we have an organization called the CSIRO, and they were actually leading the world for a really long time in the advances they were making with solar technology. And they were looking for the backing of the government at the time in order to, you know, like in order to pursue this work, because they believed that by the year 2000, if they'd received the fiscal backing, they would have been able to basically cease dependence on all fossil fuels, and that they would have then been able to share that technology with the rest of the world that would have followed suit. So while this didn't happen in our reality, it did happen in one of these parallel worlds that our Many Worlds traveler had the opportunity to visit. And what they found in that world was that, you know, by the year 2000, absolutely, no one was dependent on fossil fuels anymore. It was a remarkable thing where, you know, everything just kind of shifted. And what happened, and this is kind of hilarious, was that people then started, like weird collectors, and there's always weird collectors in every parallel world, in every reality, right? Decided they wanted to start collecting relics from the fossil fuel era because they were no longer needed and they became a thing of the past, you know. So this sea-worn petrol cap basically was washed up on a beach in Scotland. This little kid was walking along one day, saw it, was like, "Daddy, what's this in the sand?" And, you know, picked up the sea-worn petrol cap. The dad, who was a collector, was extremely excited. Basically, you know, took it, realized that it was the oldest sea-worn, well, the oldest petrol cap that had survived the fossil fuel era, and it's become an incredibly valuable relic from that timeline where, you know, fossil fuels are no longer in use. So there are some really beautiful relics like that have extraordinary stories surrounding them. I mean, there are so many, and what I would like to do is invite people to either, you know, invite us to curate one of our exhibitions in a space near you, or for a festival that you might have coming up, or if you are in Northern Ireland, in Belfast for Douglas Week, which is happening next week, I believe. Yeah, come along. We're going to be installing our exhibition there.
Great. Another question that is going to be hopefully a little bit challenging and useful for everyone. Graciela Saliman, and apologies for butchering the name, asks, when I talk with social justice activists about imagining new possible futures, many people react negatively, saying that this is a way of escaping reality. Do you receive this kind of feedback, and how do you engage in conversations of that kind?
Yeah, I think that's I thank you for that question. I think that's a really, really good question. And it's a question that I personally have struggled with, particularly, at this point in time. However, I also think that we owe it to everyone who is not able to lead a fair life where universal human rights apply, to actually start investing in our imaginations. I see imagination as a muscle. If you don't actively flex it, it is going to atrophy. There's that very famous Frederick Jameson quote, which I'm going to butcher, but it's basically something along the lines of, one of the hardest things to do is imagine an alternative to capitalism. It's very easy for us to sort of talk about all of the things that are wrong with the systems that are currently at play, and there are so many of them. But it's actually much harder to then come up with alternatives that might fly and look at how they may actually be implemented in a sort of, serious and thoughtful way. All of that involves imagination. And we're at the precipice of, thank you so much for yes, thank you for providing that quote, because my early morning brain is clearly in need of more caffeine. But yes, it's an amazing quote, and yeah. So I think we do actually need to prioritize imagination right now, and we need to be listening to activists need to work together with artists. Activists need to work together with historians. We need to start looking at sort of how we can come together and create fairer and more democratic and sustainable worlds for everyone, worlds that don't actually have systems of Eurocentric imperialism prioritized, which is something that we're seeing very much at the moment, and is heartbreaking. So we do really need to utilize these skills, and they are skills. It's not just sort of navel gazing stuff. These are tools and techniques that we can then employ in this reality. We can take some, like, okay, another example, I'm spending a lot of time in hospital at the moment, and the situation in it obviously, hospital and healthcare differs greatly depending on where you are in this world. Some people don't have any available to them. Others have, a fairly great standard of healthcare, universal healthcare, in some of the Scandinavian nations is pretty good. It's pretty good here on Aboriginal land. But it's not ideal. And some of the things that I've witnessed over the past 2 weeks in terms of care have been absolutely devastating on so many levels, and they are really layered, where beds in a ward where people are very close to death, or are preparing for open heart surgery, are sort of, such highly valued real estate, because there's not enough of them, that poor mental health patients end up in a ward with people who are incredibly ill and trying to heal, and that patient who's living with schizophrenia and is experiencing delusions, really needs adequate care, which they're not able to get. It's not fair for the nursing staff who are there and are not trained psych nurses, and it's not fair either for the other people in the ward. So there are lots of people who've been writing about this for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, who have come up with other ways we can actually, start again, reimagine the way healthcare could be, how we can actually, find the funds to finance a system that is going to be accessible to all and isn't going to sort of, harm the workers who, are generally understaffed and need so much more support. So I think that I'm going to say no. It's not a waste of time. I think this is incredibly important right now. I think this is vital.
I would agree with that. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Maria Fernanda Plaza asks, I'm interested in engaging people in thinking about their possible future personas to make them feel empowered to make decisions today that create their desired future and also connected to their possible future possible selves. And storytelling sounds very interesting to achieve this. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I've read a little bit about these techniques, and I know that some of these techniques are actually currently employed by counselors as a way of empowering their clients to feel that they have autonomy over the future direction of their story. And yeah, I'm all for it. Like I think that, irrespective of how many lives you believe we each lead, or whether you leave this world for heaven, or if you're lucky enough, or whatever happens, I personally believe that it doesn't matter. We should all be making the most of the attributes that we have in this life, the opportunities that we have in this life, and trying to be the best human that we can be. And if a framework that provides you an opportunity to think of, of your sort of future trajectory as a blank page is going to help you, pave the way to a better future and a person that you like, then I say, yeah, go for it. Whatever works. We all need to stack the decks. Things are pretty bleak right now. We need to stack the decks. We need to sort of, pool resources, come together, and share ideas, and really sort of work as much as we can towards better futures for all.
Great. And I'm going to try to squeeze in two more questions just because there are a lot of good questions. Michael Lockman asks, when you work with institutions like museums or festivals, how do you navigate communicating about the practices and politics of your parallel presentist framework? I'm specifically wondering about your practice of returning work to its reality after exhibiting it. What does communication about that practice look like with exhibition spaces, which often have their own specific practices and less progressive politics?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a really good question, and I guess you as an independent collective, you just have to weigh up. I guess you have to be quite pragmatic about it. Are you going to what sort of institutions or organizations are you prepared to work with? I think if you're very clear about your intentions and you're very clear about how you frame your own work within those institutions and or organizations, that's one approach. So you can kind of say, we do this. And then, there's often some really interesting and unexpected advantages that can come from working in, colonial spaces, like traditional museums, for example, where, you can actually, through sort of being very clear about your intention and the stories that you have as part of the work that you're sharing, you can kind of generate awareness of these practices of coloniality that are quite harmful to other communities. So you can kind of within the system reach different audiences that you may not have otherwise. But yeah, I'd say that you have to approach everything on a case-by-case basis and assess the risks and advantages. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And as a final question, Linus Tan asks a question I think most of us are thinking about. Are there any imagination methodologies or techniques that you or other world travelers use?
Oh, yeah. I think as I said right at the beginning, one of the things that perhaps is slightly unique about the parallel effect is that we work with the extraordinary archives of this reality, diverse community and institutional archives to pinpoint some of the phenomenal moments in our forgotten histories to then use as stepping off points for other worlds. And that really is a fantastic foundational basis to then sort of, start thinking about how things may have transpired differently. The other thing that helps is a pair of ruby red slippers. Props are always good, costumes are always good. But yeah, no, I think in all seriousness, having the space to sort of sit with a really interesting interdisciplinary team and to sort of understand the intersectional connections in all of these things. Often, we're talking about the importance of interdisciplinarity, but also intersectionality in terms of lived experiences and identities, but also in terms of the causes and the themes that we want to address. Generally, things are linked. There's points of intersection everywhere that perhaps you hadn't discovered before. So I think all of these things can work as muses, if you will, to create really interesting stepping off points for fascinating parallel worlds.
Thank you for that. And with that, just thank you for being here today, Daz, and sharing all these amazing experiences and all these concepts of parallel realities, parallel worlds that I have no doubt all of us will be thinking for the rest of the day and week in the coming weeks and months. Thank you also to everybody who joined us today. If you liked this session, we have more Foresight Talks coming up. We also have an upcoming session on artifact swap. So this is a 30-minute creative session on the Thursday, 2nd of May, with the world-renowned design futurist Jake Dunnigan and Jacques Garcia. They will take a selection of your signals that you can bring to the session and turn them into original artifacts from the future. And with that, just thank you again to everyone. Thank you, Daz, for waking up super early in your time zone and giving us so much food for thought and inspiration. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here.